Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to be with the Middle Country Library folks. You'll see that I have a camera here on my workspace, and I have the camera that I'm going to be speaking to. So we will try to answer any questions that pop up as they go along. A little bit about me and the bake shop. If you're new to these sessions, I've been an ongoing presenter with Middle Country for several years now. We've done a whole variety of classes, and it's always a good time. We've done some in person. We've done quite a few on Zoom since COVID, and we're looking forward to coming back into the library later this year to be in person again. So we're looking forward to that. The recipe for tonight is to make mini chocolate lava cakes. So we're going to do these in a cupcake tin, but you could very easily do these in a little ceramic ramekin. If you have a little glass dish, it would work really well in a ramekin as well. It might actually be a little bit easier to get them out, but we're going to use the cupcake tins because we know everybody typically has that at home. So in your kit was the recipe, and your dry ingredients were included all together in a little bag. That includes a half a cup of flour, a cup of powdered sugar, a quarter of a cup of cocoa powder, a half a teaspoon of baking powder, a pinch of salt, and then there additionally were some chocolates. If you haven't already and you're going to be baking alongside of us tonight, go ahead and put your chocolates in the freezer. Those chocolates need to be cold and frozen when they go into the batter, and that's what makes that little molten middle when you kind of unform your cake. So if you haven't done that, go ahead and unwrap them and put them in the freezer. Mine are in the freezer right now. They're chilling up. To this dry mixture that we have, we're going to add a half a cup of unsalted butter. So this is 1 stick. I use salted butter in all of my baking. That's just my personal preference, but you are free to use unsalted and then add salt to your liking. We're going to use 2 eggs plus the yolk of a third. We're going to use vanilla extract. And you might say, well, why do we need vanilla if we're making a chocolate dish? And the answer is because it makes it taste a little bit more full. I feel like vanilla rounds out the chocolate flavor. You could also add a dash of coffee to your chocolate cake if you wanted it to taste a little bit richer. So we're going to start by buttering our cupcake pan and dusting it with cocoa. So I'm going to take my butter that's at room temperature, and in a baker's house, there's always butter at room temperature. We go through it. My family goes through it pretty quickly. I made a whole bunch of stuff today for some Valentine's orders. So I went through a whole bunch of room temperature butter. So I'm just going to take a little bit of this butter on the end of a paper towel, and I'm going to smear it inside these cupcake tins. So for these lava cakes, you want to make sure that your tins are really generously greased, because there would be nothing worse than your cupcakes or your lava cakes not unmolding when you are finished. So you're going to use a decent amount of butter. You could also use cooking spray if you wanted to, but the butter will give it a little bit of a richer flavor. And just make sure you go around the bottom and up the sides. Once we get these in the oven, they're going to bake for about 15 or 20 minutes, depending on your oven and the temperature, how your oven tends to bake things. My oven tends to run a little hot, so things tend to be cook on the shorter side. But I always set my oven timer for the minimum amount of time that a recipe suggests, and then I check it. Your nose is a good indicator of whether or not your baked goods are done. And if you can smell it, I recommend checking. So even when my kids are baking, I'll say, did you set the timer? Because I can smell it. And 9 times out of 10, it's either ready to come out or very close to being ready to come out. If you cook it all the way through to the max recommended temperature, you might burn your item. So it's always a good idea to start with the minimum recommended time and then check and increase your baking time as needed. So once you have 6 of these little spots all buttered, we are going to, I'm just gonna wipe my hands. We're gonna put a little bit of cocoa powder on the outside, on top of the butter. And hopefully if things are gonna stick, it will stick to the cocoa powder and not to your pan. So I have just a little silicone brush. You could definitely just do this, like putting a little bit of spoonful into the pan. And I'm just going to make sure I come up the side. We're gonna put a little bit of cocoa powder in the bottom and around the side. And then when I'm done, I'm gonna knock this into the garbage just to get out any of that excess cocoa powder. So you wanna just give it a nice surface. Our batter is gonna adhere to the cocoa powder and not stick to our pan. Of course, this is all theoretical, and if it doesn't, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. If you've joined me before, you know that sometimes we have a little thinking on our feet that has to happen, and we make those adjustments as necessary. You can't always predict what's going to happen in the kitchen. You can try and be ready for all eventualities, but it's the best laid plans, right? So that's what they say. So I'm going to make sure that all of my tin spots here get dusted. And you might say, well, why couldn't I just use a cupcake liner? And the answer is because it just doesn't look as pretty when you go to unmold these delicious little lava cakes. So all of my pans are nicely dusted with cocoa powder, and they've all been buttered. So now I'm just going to step out of the frame and knock this into my garbage. You just don't want too much of that excess cocoa powder. So if you can see, that looks great. I'm just going to go back and add a little more here because this looks a little light around the edges. And then I'm going to bang that one more time. All right, so now our pan is ready. If you have not yet preheated your oven and you are going to bake with us, you should go ahead and do that. You'll want to preheat your oven to 350 degrees. And that will be our baking temperature. So now we're going to start building our batter. For this take and make, I gave you the flour mixed into the cocoa powder and the baking powder. I mean, the powdered sugar, I'm sorry. This recipe uses powdered sugar and not granulated sugar so that it I think it helps melt into that delicious chocolate flavor a little bit easier. So I'm using a stand mixer. I'm just going to swing this around so you can see. This is my stand mixer, and I put that whole stick of butter right into the mixer. I scraped it down, and to the butter, I'm going to add my eggs plus 1 egg yolk. So I'm going to crack my eggs into a bowl. I like to do the eggs into a little bowl so I can make sure that no shells go like that into my batter. So I'm going to empty the egg, and I'm going to add them one at a time because you don't get eggshell in, then you're one step ahead of the game. So we're going to do 2 full eggs, and then we're going to add the yolk, 1 additional yolk. So to separate, I'm not going to keep the yolk in this instance. So I'm going to break my egg apart. And I want to retain that yolk. So I'm just going to kind of pour the egg back and forth between the shells to eliminate that excess white. And I'm just using a little garbage plate. And then I'm going to pour that yolk into my bowl, and those are going to go into my mixer with my butter. If you were doing this recipe from scratch at home, you would then add your powdered sugar to this recipe. But because I included all of your dry ingredients together, I'm just going to mix these 2 wet ingredients. And then to this little mixture, I'm going to add my vanilla. I do find that you could certainly use expensive vanilla. I actually have some homebrew vanilla extracts going right now. I ordered the beans, and they've been brewing up um, a storm for almost a year now. They were put into alcohol on February 28th of last year. So this is my homemade vanilla extract. You can see the beans in there if you look close. I try not to open this until I need it. It takes a good year to 12 to 18 months. But in the meantime, I like this McCormick's imitation. I buy it in a large jar at ShopRite. I do like the flavor, and I like the price. Like it's like $5 for this because it's imitation. In a recipe like this, where you're not really counting on the vanilla flavor so much as in its independent flavor, I think that this is just fine. So I'm just stopped my mixer and I'm scraping down my bowl. You want to make sure that all of those butters pieces get incorporated. I'm just going to swing my camera over a little bit more so you can see. We're going to keep mixing this until it looks a little bit pale, if you can see in that. I'm going to flip the mixer to a higher speed, and we want to just incorporate some air into our butter and eggs. The butter, when it bakes, is a dispersal vehicle in our baked good. So it allows us to carry the flavor into our item. So in this instance, the chocolate cupcakes, the butter will evaporate the liquid, the water in the butter will evaporate when it's baking and will leave behind a little pocket of deliciousness, a fatty goodness that's why butter is so important in baking. We're going to add our vanilla. This is a teaspoon. I'm going to do a little squirt. And then we're going to mix that again. And now to this mixture, we're going to add our dry ingredients. So this is our half a cup of flour, a cup of powdered sugar, quarter of a cup of cocoa, and half a teaspoon of baking powder. We put a little pinch of salt in there too. Salt is a flavor enhancer. That's going to be important to make sure that, things taste a little bit more like what they're supposed to. And then I'm just going to set my mixer to a lower speed so it looks like it's combining. And then I'll flip it up to a medium speed and wait till that all gets incorporated. Now this should be fairly batter-like. It's going to be a little bit kind of on the thicker side. It's not a thin, runny batter. This is going to be a thicker cake batter. It will be good for scooping. And now this looks well mixed. You can see inside my bowl there, it's got great consistency. I'm going to scrape down the sides of my bowl and make sure there's no powder or unmixed chunks. And then when we go to portion this out, we're going to put a scoop of batter. Then we're going to add our chocolates from the freezer and we're going to cover it up with a little bit more batter. So that looks pretty good. I'm going to just give it one more whirl. These are all the very professional terms for baking. I hope you're writing them down. Just make sure that all gets well incorporated. And that looks great. So I'm going to detach my mixer, my paddle, and I'm just going to make some room. I'm just going to make some room on my workspace here. I'm just going to throw away this stuff that I don't need. All right. So I do find that when I'm doing cupcakes, a cookie scoop or an ice cream disher makes a big difference in terms of getting consistent size. So you'll see I have for my work, cookie scoops in every shape and size. I'm just trying to find all of them so I can show you. I have big dishers and I have little dishers. So you'll see that this There's lots of choices in terms of cupcake dishing. This gives you a nice even amount that goes into each cupcake holder. So I'm going to start with the smallest of the dishers that I have, this one with a black handle. I like this one because it has a nice easy mechanism that rolls. This one is a little easier to use than this one, gets a little clicky. I don't know if you can see that. So I like the ones with a separate handle. I'm going to just clean off my paddle, and then I'm going to scoop a little bit of batter into each pan. So I mentioned before that you could do this in individual ramekins if you had ramekins and you wanted to make them like that. It would probably make 4 ramekins, just because the ramekins tend to be a little bit bigger than the cupcake holders. Ooh. I lost my earbud. Hold on. So we have our muffin pans, cupcake tins that have been prepared. I'm going to take about a full scoop of batter, and I'm going to plop it right in the middle on the bottom. And then I'm going to do that again, 2. And I'm going to do it all to make sure that there's batter in all 6 little holes. And the cupcake scoops are nice because this handle lets you release the batter and you don't have to struggle with it too much. If you've ever had, batter that just didn't want to come off your spoon, using the dishers makes a good difference. And you can buy them in bulk on Amazon. You can get them at the restaurant supply. I'm going to grab my chocolates that are in the freezer. So just hang on one second. Now the chocolates that I gave you in your kit were these little hearts, these little dove promises. This will be fine to work with. You can also use chocolate truffle. I ran out of the little hearts, so I'm going to do a couple with the hearts and a couple with the truffle in the middle. So I'm going to put that right in. Lost my camera here. We're going to put it right in the middle, and we're going to press down. And then we're going to put another scoop of batter right on top. And you want to bake these until they just start to pull away from the side of your pan. Make sure that other scoop of batter goes right on top of your chocolate, and you don't want to mess with it too much. You don't have to wiggle it around. You don't have to nudge it anywhere. You can just put it on and let it kind of melt down on top of the chocolate. And they're going to cover your chocolates, and you may have a little bit of extra batter left, so you certainly could do additional cupcakes if you wanted to. It looks like you probably would have enough batter to do 1 or 2 more, depending on how full you make your cupcake holders. So now my cupcakes are good. You see, I didn't mess with it too much. I just plopped the batter in. We don't want to touch the sides too much because we want the butter and the cocoa powder to remain there. So my oven is preheated. I'm going to just stick these in the oven and set the timer. And again, I set it for the minimum 15 minutes, and we'll check them when they're finished. When they're done, we're going to run a little knife around the outside, and then we will release them onto a platter. Since I have a little bit of extra batter, I wanted to show you one in a ramekin. So this is what the ramekin is, the little white ceramic Pyrex dishes. So I'm going to grab another paper towel. So we're going to do the same process. We're going to make sure that this gets nicely buttered around the sides, in the creases. And you can see that this is a little bit bigger than the cupcake space that we had. So we'll probably use up the remaining batter that we have. I will need one more chocolate. I'll grab that in a second. So the Bite-Sized Bake Shop was started in 2013, and we are an at-home bakery. So I do most of my baking out of my house. I started because I really liked to bake. I was a management consultant at the time, but baking has always been my passion. And I decided that I was going to do what made me happy. So I had an opportunity. My husband was super supportive. And he said, I think we should give it a shot. So we started the bake shop, and I was able to get it moving. I was at the Port Jeff Farmers Market every Sunday for about 3 years. And I built up a really nice clientele, people that were excited to have my treats. We started with mostly miniature cupcakes and cookie bites. And working the farmers market circuit is certainly not for the weary. It was lots of early Sunday mornings. And I did that for about 3.5 years until I had my son. He's 6 now. So it was too hard for my husband to be running the kids to soccer and different schedules and to have a newborn. So once Declan was born, I gave up the farmers market, but I had a good following at that point. We have a question about the ramekins. The ramekins get placed directly on the oven rack or placed on a cookie sheet. I would put it on a cookie sheet just because you don't want that direct contact with the heat. Some recipes might even have you make a bain marie, which is a water bath. I won't bake like that. That's just a little bit complicated. If you were going to do a souffle, you would put your little ramekin inside a Pyrex dish or something oven safe, and then you could add a little bit of hot water. But for these, they'll cook fairly quickly, so you shouldn't need to do that. But I will put them on a little cookie sheet so that it does not directly touch the oven rack. So we started the bake shop, and we've been doing custom baking ever since. So we do everything from cakes and cookies and cupcakes, miniature and standard size, full size wedding cakes, all kinds of royal icing sugar cookies, pretty much anything you can think of. I try not to ever say no if somebody says, can you do X, Y, and Z? And I say, I'll try. But it's been great, and the community has been really supportive, so I'm very fortunate. But I do enjoy the teaching aspect of my job too, and COVID has forced us to kind of get creative with what we were doing and how we were delivering our content, and we moved from in-person classes to online classes and lots of DIY kits. So I do lots of take and makes for the Middle Country Public Library, for my local library, which is Emma Clark. And then we do lots of DIY cookie kits and all kinds of things. I'm just going to step away and grab one more piece of chocolate, and then I'll finish filling this ramekin. 1 second, I'll be right back. So of course, we're in the heart of chocolate season, right? Getting ready for Valentine's Day. So I am going to add this truffle to my ramekin, and then I'm just going to put the rest of this batter right on top. And hopefully this works and makes a beautiful little lava cake. So hard. We bake all the time. I have 2 older girls in addition to my little guy, 11 and 13. And they're always like, Mom, it's so hard to eat healthy because you always have delicious things around. So I try my best to make sure that we don't have too many things floating around, but it's difficult sometimes, especially after a class like tonight. All right, so I have my cake batter in my ramekin. I'm going to set my mixing bowl aside, and then I'm going to add this ramekin on a cookie sheet, and I'm going to put this in the oven as well. All right, so any questions of what we've talked about so far? Anything I can answer for you related to this recipe, or other baking questions that you might have, like burning things you've always wanted to know about baking? How many people are with us? 9. Can these be prepared the day before and baked the day of when serving? The only challenge with doing them ahead of time is that your chocolate won't stay frozen. And I'm not sure how they would bake from frozen. So it really is, you could certainly prepare the batter ahead of time and put it in the fridge, and then assemble and bake them when you're ready. I wouldn't assemble them and then put them in the fridge just before you're ready to bake them. I'm just not sure you'll get that same melty chocolate if your chocolate's not frozen. Other questions? These can certainly be made to look as fancy as you like. You could do homemade whipped cream on top. You could do raspberries. You can make a little raspberry coulis, put it on the plate, and then when you unmold your cakes, do that right on top. A few raspberries on the side, or a little piece of mint leaf. We have about 7 minutes. Maybe I'll make some fresh whipped cream so that we have that for on top of my cakes. My kids are gonna love me. Gonna grab a clean mixing bowl and my whisk attachment. So fresh whipped cream is really easy to make. This is a nice addition to your cakes. You certainly don't need to serve them. They will be very chocolatey. So the whipped cream will help with some of the richness of the chocolate. Let me grab some heavy cream. All right, so I'm going to make just a little bit of whipped cream. I'm going to put about half a cup of heavy cream in my mixing bowl. And for this, I'm going to make it a real treat, and I'm going to use one of those fresh vanilla beans. So I have these lovely beans in my jar. So I'm going to open. This is my mother jar. This is where I store the beans that I'm not using for extract. But you always want to store fresh beans in alcohol because they will dry out. So I'm going to take one of these beans and I'm just going to squeeze the caviar right into my whipped cream. Now vanilla, oh, it smells so good. This vanilla extract, I said, these beans have been in alcohol for about a year. And it will make the most delicious vanilla flavor. I'm gonna grab a little bit of sweetener. Hang on one second. So I have just a little bit of granulated Splenda. So this is our 0-calorie sweetener. You could certainly do some powdered sugar in there. We're just gonna kind of do what my family would like. So I'm gonna add a little bit of the Splenda, probably about a half a tablespoon to about a half a cup of heavy cream. And then I'm gonna set it to whip. And that happens fairly quickly. So our whipped cream will become frothy. How much vanilla do you use if we don't have fresh vanilla beans? About a teaspoon, or to taste. You know, vanilla is one of those things that doesn't taste good on its own. It smells good, but if you wanted to just use regular extract, there are lots of choices. So the other extract that I use a lot, this is the Better Vanilla. It's also an imitation, but it's made by Loran, which is the folks that make lots of different kinds of flavorings. So they do a lot of things. They do different emulsions. So they have all different flavors. That's a butter vanilla. They have coconut, strawberry, lots of choices. That's the Better Vanilla that I use, like when I'm making cookies. And we're just gonna let this whip on high speed. Regular sugar is fine. Yep. You want to add the regular sugar to your cream in the liquid stage so that it has a chance to dissolve. If you wait and add the sugar after, it'll stay grainy and you don't want that. So that's why powdered sugar works really well too, because it doesn't have that granularity. This is just whipping away. You see, my mixer's hard at work here. What other questions do you have? I can smell my chocolate cakes. They smell delicious. I wonder. I take you over to the oven and we can peek in.
My didn't even need the full 15 minutes. It was about 13 and a half minutes. And you'll see that they have just a little bit a jiggle in the cupcake. Like the center seems just a little underdone. And that's what we're looking for here. They've just started to pull away from the sides. So I'm going to take a knife. I'm going to take a little offset spatula, and I'm just going to run it around the edges. Ooh, they are not sticking, which is fantastic. And I'm going to run all the way around all 6 of them. And then I'm going to take these and I'm going to unmold them onto a single plate because of the way that this pan is set up. I don't think you'd be able to do them. All right, so we lifted it out of the pan. And when you are going to plate it, you would just flip it upside down. So let me get just a little plate.
Sorry about that. So I'm going to just take this and have a plate over here. I'm going to take that and just flip it right over. And hopefully there's a little molten middle in there. Let's see. Ooh, oh boy. I think we have success. Look at that. Can you see that? Let's get these out of the way. So we have one of my lava cakes here, kind of broke a little bit as I was plating it, and you can see all of that delicious chocolate goo right in there, which is exactly what we want, right? So I'm going to let my whipped cream come back up to whip. And then we'll put just a dollop of that whipped cream right on top. I'm gonna grab that other ramekin out of the oven. Hold on. All right, that other ramekin needs just a few more minutes. So I'm just going to take a little bit of this whipped cream out of my bowl. And you could certainly whip it to stiffer consistency. Ooh. I'm just going to add a little bit of that on the top. And there you have it. There's our molten chocolate lava cakes. I'm excited that it was all lava in the middle. Any other questions? Things I can answer for you? No? Well, we always want to see your creations. If you want to try the recipe and send us a screenshot, you can always send it to us on Facebook. We're at the Bite Size Bake Shop. Or you can follow us on Instagram. We're at _Bite Size Bake Shop. I am also going to taste mine because Michelle said she tasted hers and they were delicious. You cannot eat all of these. Do I heat? Yes, I would heat them before serving. Maybe just like 15 seconds in the microwave. But this does look pretty delicious. Okay, yum. So that was pretty delicious. So I hope that you have, yeah, I would leave them in the ramekins and then reheat them. So you get that delicious, flow. I think that would be great. Any other questions? Well, thank you so much for joining me tonight. And I hope that I see you again. Keep an eye out for additional programs from the Bite Size Bake Shop, and we'll be in touch soon. I hope everyone enjoys their lava cakes and have a happy Valentine's Day.
Thank you for joining us, everyone. And I'm very jealous of those lava cakes.
Oh, it smells
Enjoy
really
them.
good in here.
Enjoy them.
Thanks, guys. Good night.
Have a good one.